Hi everyone, welcome to Football and Finance, season 1, episode 10 with Nash and Joe. Back again after a little break. Some of us have been enjoying the Caribbean sand and crystal clear waters, whilst the rest of us have just been working.
Don't lie, because right now you're not even in the country, so so don't even chat breeze, because you're not even working from your home right now. So or podcast from your home.
Right. Bucharest is not Jamaica. They're not. Come on.
Potato,
No, it's pretty nice. I can't lie. Nice wedding of one of my good friends. So yeah, nice. His wife's Romanian. Nice to be able to celebrate it with both their families out here, which is really nice. It's like one of those underrated parts of Europe that you don't really hear about from a tourism perspective, but it's actually really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I need to do some more of those trips, to be fair, and to those spots where a little bit off the beaten track for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's what I enjoy about it. It's not like massively big on the tourism like Croatia, where you can kind of enjoy kind of a lot of unspoiled nature, amazing food. You get a very similar, not the same, because I guess it's not fair to kind of block all Eastern European countries into one, but you do get some similarities in architecture and history and culture and overlaps with food. But yeah, it's been cool. So yeah, good break. Not as nice as your swanky Jamaica Virgin Atlantic reclined seat life, but some of us can dream, eh?
Yeah, you just need to find a rich wife. That's what you need
to do. Damn. Talking about not rich wives, but like the rich people.
Yeah.
Sir Kylian, or we should call it Don Kylian Mbappe.
He's about to make a whole lot of money.
Like, to be fair, he was already making a lot of money. Like, I didn't know that he was actually earning 75 million euros, I think, net at PSG a year. So, like, he was already 75 million net. So with like a bonus, he was getting like 70 million loyalty bonus for every season he stayed. So he was clearing 75 net, getting 70 a year.
Like 15% bonus on top.
145. And we don't know what his goals, assists, and performance-related bonuses were. So let's just say he was earning 200 mil. It's like, it's easier just to do this. Like, let's not play games. But our guy Kylian, finally it happened. It was like one of those like dating and courting for years and years. Like everyone knew he was going to go to Madrid. I don't even think the bookies would have given you any odds on that. But it's finally got it over the line, man. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, from a footballing point, I'm like, where's he going to play? Where are these people going to play with all their new signs? But from a financial standpoint, I'm like, Real Madrid kind of flexing their muscles again. I get so. In order to sign him, he was a free agent, right? But that when you're a free agent, you just get more of the pie. Like people often will think that, oh, that means that the club didn't spend any money up front.
Yeah.
For players in particular, it means instead of that transfer fee going to the club, that transfer fee can come to me with a little. So I can't remember exactly, but I think it's around 150 million euros that he's going to get from mad. So when you start work and like, here's the golden handshake, it's 150 million. Okay, so he has that.
It was big though. Like when NBA guys were chiming in, NBA guys are like, Kylian's agent with the money they secure, and they're like, what? Another sport? What?
Yeah, they were vexed because they're not. We don't usually on par with them, but you know the one or two that we have there that are special, like Kylian, they can be comparable to some of these NBA superstars. So yeah, I saw Real Madrid flexing their muscles. I was a little bit like, no, how's this fitting in with all the profitability and sustainability rules that they've got going off over there? So we've done a little bit of digging, especially when you think of the signings that they made last year with Bellingham, again, like kind of 6 figures. No, what am I talking about? 9 figures. 9 figures.
You're thinking of Joe Bellingham out here, weren't you?
Yeah, 9 figures. I was like, so I just thought that finally it's happened. Yeah, he's gonna maybe make a little bit less money over the lifetime on a kind of annual basis, but
a little bit
kind of money up front. Okay, I'm not gonna be like too sorry for you. But then I had the kind of juxtaposition with how is Real Madrid doing this and Barcelona are where they are financially. Like when you see some of the, I don't want to say financial mismanagement, but the financial situation that they're in.
It is financial.
I'm not judging. I'm not a finance guy. You know that. I'm just saying this financial situation that they're in compared to Real Madrid, it's chalk and cheese at the moment, where these guys are buying £100 million players every year, and then you're like selling off future revenue, like it's just crazy to me. I had to like really work out what that means in my head. Again, my finance brain. Yeah, those are my initial thoughts. What were you thinking when you first saw this?
My first thing, right, it's probably like the weirdest take, because I don't think I've heard anyone say this. I felt for PSG, man. I was like, damn. Like, no, come, no, think about this. Actually deep this, right? Think about, like you said, obviously, football bread finally comparable to NBA bread, NBA guys, and now like, well, what's going on there? Imagine the best player in the NBA or in the NFL, just like Patrick Mahomes, just walking for free. Like, could you imagine like the Kansas City Chiefs? Everyone in that ball is getting sacked. Like every senior exec that was involved in player personnel, they're getting sacked. Like for PSG, for that to happen, I guess I know there's a lot of dynamics. He ran his contract down, but to kind of walk out the park, the prince, and you get like nothing. I know they save it on the wages, like they saved obviously the 75 mil net, which was whatever it was gross, and they'll save the 70 million loyalty fee, so they can spread that around. I get that, but even if you spread that across 5 players, that's not Kylian Mbappe. Like there'll be very good players and all that, which is great, but they're not Kylian Mbappe. So my first thought was like, man, like PSG, whoever's doing their contracts in the future, they're putting in some more clauses to get something more, because like just saving on the wage and the bonus isn't substantial. But then I kind of thought, they're Qataris, man. They're wiping their tears with those dollar bills or 500 euro notes. So like that will consume and absorb all those tears. But I think the thing that really grabbed me about the Mbappe is obviously, like you said, so all the stuff that they've now done, Real Madrid, I'm starting to look at how are they affording all of this stuff. And then when you start kind of unpacking it, I think it's because they've sold so many players, but I don't want to say they've done it low key, but it
is kind of low key though, isn't it? You're like, oh yeah, Odegaard's from there. Oh yeah, Kovacic is from there. Oh yeah, Isco's not there anymore. You're like, what?
Adding up the numbers, and then you're like, oh shit! Like actually, they've made what they sold. Theo Hernandez, that was quite big bread. Mm-hmm. So even if you were to average out all those signings and say 35 mil ahead, they've still made like 225, 250 in player sales. Like, and all the clauses they're putting on them. But then there's also been like quite savvy, and I guess that's one of the things that's annoyed me as a Chelsea fan. You look at some of the free.
I know what you're gonna say.
If you see some of the free transfers they managed to, I'm like, how are you getting like David Alaba? Rudiger, Courtois. And they're meant to get in Alphonso Davies next year. He's going to be 24 or 25 when he arrives on free transfers. This is like some like football manager shit where you're just getting, they're not even past their prime. You're getting a 33-year-old Michael Ballack like Chelsea did back in the day. You're getting like players still at the top of their game, still rising, hitting prime 4-0. I know you're paying them bonuses and you're obviously all that type of stuff, but the transfer fee, like even if you said they paid him the 150 million sign on, right? PSG would never have accepted a 150 million bid for him. And they signed him for 170. So like it's much of a muchness. So
I think Neymar was 220 or something like that. Yeah. So it would have surpassed that in my eyes. That's what I think anyway. So signing players, and it's not just like the players, it's like you said, the kind of the level of performance and where they're at. If they were signing young people on free transfers, you'd be like, oh, he's only 19, 20, whatever. Or they're signing like really old players, you'd be like, oh, he's 34, probably over the hill, that's fine. But they're signing prime people, like prime like in the and then letting go the deadwood. So
For fees, for big fees. Remember they sold Casemiro and Varane for like nearly 70 mil combined.
Yeah. But they've been doing that as well. When you think of people like Ozil, when you think of Di Maria, again, like good players, quality players, but they've been successful without them, and they've kept their brand of success. I don't know what that means, but they've kept winning, and the brand that they have is still one of 6 Champions Leagues in 7 years or whatever it is. So they've kept it, and so being able to do that has meant, I think, that they've had the cash in order to almost. I think there's a stat around them actually making, in the last 2 decades, they've made a profit. That's a 20-year span, and it might not be a huge profit, but still, that when other clubs are if you look at those 20 years, you're like, oh my goodness, that for Real Madrid to do that, and that shows that then they are selling players at the right time, and it's always at the right time. And I think I've said this before. You want to be a year early than a year late when it comes to your valuation of players. So getting rid at the right time is good, and they are finding players at the right time. On free transfers and
we even talk about the Brazilian contingent. Like Perez is literally like just going around Brazil. Anyone that's like maybe can't drive yet is like you play football.
You got 2 left. Okay, yeah. You can play on the left. Okay, yeah.
Because I'm like Rodrigo, Endrick, but I think and ultimately, if you look at some of those transfers, I think when you asked that question at the top and you said, like, look at Barcelona, like Barcelona would be looking next door at their neighbor, going, what's going on? I think the thing that probably separates them is it's not the only thing, but one clear separation between the two clubs is if you look at the players that Real Madrid have taken a punt on, Brazilian or young or whatever from South America, all of them worked out. Like Vinicius, like the big ones. I know someone will come and quote me. They signed some 6 million Cruzeiro fullback who's now playing for Hull City. But I mean, like the big ones that they've splashed out recently, Vinicius, Rodrigo, they've all panned out. And if you look at Endrick, like I'm not saying he's going to be like the next Pele. I know they're hyping him up, 3 goals, 3 games, or whatever it is. But even he, for that fee, is looking like that punt has paid off. And if you look at Barca on the other side, there's some players that they've purchased, and you're like, oh man, like Serginho Dest, that was a horrendous flop. Like Frankie De Jong, jury's still out, but he cost too much. Like Rafinha, like what was Rafinha like? I was actually pissed when Chelsea
50 million.
Like 50 million. I remember when Chelsea lost out to him. I was like, oh man, we messed up. How did we not get Rafinha? I'm looking now, going, no, we dodged one there. Like I can't.
I still think. No, I'm not going to football side. I still think he's a good player. Did I think he was Barcelona worthy, 50 million above? I'm not sure. I don't. It doesn't seem like they correctly evaluated a lot of their players, and then the players that they have, then they're not sellable. Like nobody. It's similar. Like so when you think they got Gundogan last season on a free, and that's the thing. Like Gundogan, great player. But he is definitely in the twilight of his career. Like you can't sell him on. Everybody knows his quality, but you're not going to sell him on for 50, 60 million now. That's not going to happen. So you almost have you're having acquiring these assets that really
sitting on your books till they leave.
Yeah, really on big money.
Or you're paying out.
But the thing is, why I said, what's the difference? Because in many ways, Real Madrid and Barcelona have done similar things in terms of selling future revenue.
Yeah, that's true.
Which the way I'm going to explain it in my little bird brain is that if I own a house that I'm renting, and every year I get every month I'm getting £1,000 a month, so every year I'm getting 12 grand, yeah. And then I know I'm going to have this house for 25 years. So that's how much the mortgage is. And let's just presume that the mortgage is going to be, it goes up maybe like 5% a year, whatever. But let's use that £1,000 figure. They've basically said, give me, I don't know, 60 grand now. and then in the future years, the rent that I'm going to collect, you can take X percentage, which is going to be way more than that 60 grand. So it might even be 100 grand that they're going to end up recouping. I was like, again, there's so much that factors into this. You've got to factor in inflation. You've got to factor in what the commercial rights are going to be of that particular asset in, what the market is saying. But that to me sounded like
wow.
a very risky strategy. But then I saw that Real Madrid were doing it. So I was like, oh, it can't be that risky. Like, there's no person who's done it and is doing well, and it seems to be working out for them. So what's happened to you? And I think what's happened to them is like the wage bill is crazy, and the people that they bought haven't really been of value. That's what I think anyway. That's where a lot of their spending, and they're selling their parts of their studio, their intellectual property that creating content, video content, or film content, whatever it is they're doing.
It's a shame though, because you're right. So like Real Madrid have kind of embarked on that. So like essentially what you were describing with that house analogy is like what us boring finance people called revenue-based financing. So you're basically you're giving up future earnings to draw down a large amount of capital now with an interest that's greater than the amount that you initially borrowed, really. But I think the challenge is almost, I'm surprised that Barcelona are doing it, but then I'm not surprised. I'm surprised that they're doing it because they can see literally their own biggest rival where they're at now, having done it. They literally have nowhere else to go. Like Barca have maxed that out to the max. And I know on the previous podcast we've joked, and I still stand by it, they could get themselves out of it very quickly by just selling 3 players in La Masia, 4 players, Ronaldo, Araujo, all these guys, 60, 70, Pedri, Gavi, all these. They could sell 4 players, clear it. But they don't want to because it goes against their morals and they're owned by the fans, and the fans would sign that off. So in one part, I was surprised that Real Madrid embarked on that, having seen what impact it's had on Barcelona and their finances. On the other hand, I'm not, because if you were to deduct all that money they've drawn down, so I think they've drawn down like about, what was that, 650 million euros, about thereabouts, using revenue-based financing with different PE firms, so like Providence in the US and Sixth Street and all these other companies. So they've drawn down about, let's just say, just over $500 million over the last like 5 to 7 years. What that's enabled them to do is to do various different activities, projects, whether it's transfers. I think some of them had no restrictions, so they could use it immediately on their transfers. And some they've obviously had to use specific to their stadium that they've just renovated for 1.4 billion when it's all said and done. My worry for them is a lot of that revenue-based financing. Like when you use that analogy of the house was a good analogy, but what was also maybe isn't captured by the analogy is if it's based on your future revenues, they're not planned. You don't know what that could be. And it's obviously tied to performance, right? And I think where they're lucky is, if we're being honest, the league isn't competitive. Their biggest challenge is the Barcelona, Atletico. Everybody else is, sorry, Girona, I know you did bits this year and you're in the Champions League. I love a small team on the come up, but like, we won't see you there next year. So peace and love. Enjoy the Champions League.
It won't be sustainable either way. You could do like a Monaco or a Leicester, but we've seen, even I'd say Leverkusen this year. It's not going to be long term. You not to see that longevity in it.
And the issue with that for them is, I think they're almost hedging that over the next 10 to 15 years they'll be very successful in the Champions League, because La Liga is very obvious. They know their broadcasting rights model is so skewed towards the big teams and heavily affects the little teams. So their only variant Copa del Rey, again, no one cares. The largest variant, I mean, no one cares in terms of financial revenue for those who are massive Copa del Rey sports, but their largest variable in terms of financial revenue is the Champions League and how well they perform. If in the years that they do well, such as this year where they've collected La Liga and the Champions League, the PE firms actually do even better out of it. So they actually they'll claim a large amount of the money.
Because it's a percentage, it's not a fixed fee.
And when they do badly, so basically the PE firm does well on the upside, and they kind of still do all right on the downside. So like Madrid have taken a massive risk, but then when you look at Florentino Perez, when all of this backfires, they're like maybe 10, 12 years away from maybe where Barcelona are if you were to kind of like expedite it out. he ain't going to be around. He might not even be alive. I think he's in his 70s. Like, and also he can't be held accountable. It's not like banking or law where there's some recompense even when you may not be. Yeah. Like, so I can see why he's doing it, because I guess in his era he'll be like, I'm the most successful director ever, 8 Champions Leagues, multiple La Ligas, signed Mbappe, signed Hazard, signed etc. But then no one will ever put, wait, where was the legacy? Where's the genesis of our financial turmoil? Where did it start? Oh wait, it started with him. By then, he might not be here. Not wishing harm to anyone, but I'm just speaking based on his age.
He might be not in that role, especially like.
And the thing that actually grabbed me is I was like, let me work out some of the numbers, right? Let me just give you this and leave you with this, right? So on the 360 they borrowed from Sixth Street and Legends, right? So they're going to receive 30% of the club's stadium-based revenue, excluding their season ticket, right? For 20 years. In 18-19 season, their stadium-based revenue was about 143 million euros, right? So if we just use that number, map it out. So 30% is 43 million a year. So
for 20 years
are going to get for 20 years. So if you say that they're going to go for
800 mil,
800 mils, and how much did they borrow?
600. You said.
No, 360.
360.
Yes, so they borrowed 800 in total across Providence. So they borrowed about 600 in total across Providence and Sixth Street and Legends.
Okay, yeah.
From Sixth Street, the 30% that Sixth Street are going to get is against their stadium. So they're going to pay Sixth Street and Legend over the next 30 years, so till 2054 or 52, because that's when they borrowed it from 2022. They're going to basically pay back over 800 million on the initial borrowing of 360 million. They're going to pay 800 million.
Do you care if you make that amount of money, or if you like? So with that investment in the stadium or facilities or whatever, and you're now getting Taylor Swift and whoever performing there, and you're getting this revenue that's coming. Do you think it's enough to justify it in the years to come? In there being like, oh, actually,
it was
took out this loan, but because people see like when you think about your mortgage, people are like, oh, I didn't realize over the lifetime of my mortgage, I'm going to spend like double or triple the amount.
That, I guess the difference is, right, like with a mortgage, everyone requires a place or roof over their head to live, right? You do not need to go and buy Kylian Mbappe. That is
especially when you've won 5 out of the last 6 or 6 out of the last 7 Champions League.
So what you hiring him for? To win the Copa del Rey? Because you've already won everything without him. You just did the double. So it's like, Kylian, we're paying you 150 bonus. We're paying you 26 a year because we won the treble, because we want you to win the Copa del Rey. You will take us over the top to win the Copa del Rey.
You say that though, and this is what I think some of it is about, transferring it into value that doesn't have that linear route. So buying someone like Mbappe is just going to create so much more other revenue or add to some of the other revenue streams, whether that's sponsorship, whether that's shirt sales, whether that's just general interest about the club. And like, you've got the crown jewel. It's giving it that LeBron effect, like they're going to.
I know that. I hear you.
And some of that isn't going to go into the PE fund's pocket, because that will come in the streams that isn't
different ways.
So I kind of understand it in a way that I think they must have done some other calculations around it to think, yeah, it's going to create this. If we spend it on this, we spend it on that, spend it on this. Yeah, we're going to give up a lot of the stadium money, and that's going to, think people are going to look at that figure. But there's going to be way more that's coming from over here somewhere.
But I think the biggest challenge to them, so you're right, and I think that is true. So there's the kind of extenuating or external factors around Mbappe that you can't currently kind of map or model or see for now. Like, okay, fine. Like it's like when Lewis Hamilton, or I can't remember what it was, where Ronaldo moved back to Man United, they had like 6 million new followers on their page or something, etc. So there'll be that type of stuff. But I think where there is kind of no denying and there's nowhere to go, is they've been using this kind of revenue-based financing as a way of being financially, like you talked about the fact that they've been quite solvent and financially profitable over the last 20 years. But these funds have been adding to it.
Yeah,
UEFA are investigating whether using revenue-based financing and kind of revenue generated from intangible assets that are not player sales, whether they can actually be used as your total calculation. And that's where I think that they'll start to fall foul.
I really want, and that's one of the conversations then if we want to move on. But in terms of like, that is a big question in my head. What is I guess a footballing asset? And I could probably, what is a footballing asset which people feel comfortable with and saying, oh yeah, this should be counted in the PSR rules, for instance, and what player sales, I think probably everybody would agree with that. And what is a non-footballing asset that people get real uncomfortable with when they see them monopoly hotels going from Park Lane to Hilton, like, or like this, where people are selling rights in companies. They may be they may be IPO'd. They may be what did we just talk about? Selling future revenue, like So what's the line between? I feel like there's like this I don't know, like virtuous thing about, oh, we done it the right way. We did it through selling players, and then people it's like, oh, but it's still just money at the end of the day. I feel like it's just capitalism doing its thing, but I don't know. People are a little bit annoyed, upset, angry at the fact that people are making revenue from other things that aren't football, and this bit is the football bit. So,
but this goes back to some of the things we've talked about. I think the danger is ultimately people forget that football clubs is just another form of a business. So they're like, you know what, they're like a startup a crypto company that you run, a charity, a kids theatre business. It's just a business, but it's just the scale and the product that may be different, that are different. The scale, the product, the impact on society, the relevance to kind of wider industry. I think that whole concept around like the sale of assets, I think the first thing that came to mind when you think about these assets is, damn man, we say this a lot. The Premier League, do they understand their own rules? As in, like, do they have someone in their team that sits in there? I no disrespect to whoever's in the role now, but bro, you need to just do your job better, he or she. Like, that looks at the rules and actually looks at it and thinks about its applicability now to modern day football, given when it was written, and whether it needs revision. And secondly, ways in which owners and investors will try and circumnavigate it. Because this one's like an obvious one. Because the funny thing is, I was having a conversation with so the wedding I came out to Romania for with one of the groom's mates from school. And he was talking about it, saying, oh yeah, damn, like Chelsea always like finding ways to try and break the rules. And I was like, Chelsea aren't actually the first team to try and sell an asset. Like, so Man United sold Man U TV to another part of their business, but they did that for a different reason. They did it because they were actually trying to move it into a different umbrella group, but they still sold it. The issue isn't necessarily, and if the Premier League are honest, it's not necessarily the sale of the hotel or the car park. It's the fact that they sold it for the amount that they did, and the amount they sold it for got them out of PSR jail. That is the issue. And my challenge with that, if we're all being like virtuous and like we want to virtue signal and be like morally uncorruptible, right? We need to, I'm in the camp of like, nobody breaks the rules or everybody breaks the rules. Like, so the fact that you already allowed United to do it under different guise and different circumstances years ago, and now you're annoyed that Chelsea are basically using it as a loophole to get out now, that's a you problem, not a Chelsea problem. So I think ultimately they've got to start looking at how they set rules to make sure that they actually meet the requirements, not only for today, but also for the future. And then they need to stop reacting in a discriminatory way, whereby you instantly put forward a motion to change the rule because you saw Chelsea did it, but you didn't put forward that same rule when Man United did it or when other teams have done similar yet different things. And I think the final point, and then I'll be keen to get your thoughts, is ultimately this happens in business all the time. Like Ineos, big, massive multinationals, people move around businesses into different conglomerates, different ownership structures, different subgroups, recreate new companies under company's house. This is not something that's like barn spanking new that happens. It's just the first time we've seen it. Like, it happens regularly. So like, this is where I feel sometimes the Premier League are lacking in individuals who have a business acumen or business background, because ultimately they're responding to it from a football perspective rather than looking at it as a business and applying the same business nous and sense you ordinarily would.
Yeah, and I guess we want to frame the discussion a little bit. Like, so the Premier League met last week and put forward a number of motions. The one that we're kind of referring to is around they looked at a number of different things, and some of them didn't even table because they knew they were gonna they knew it wasn't going to pass, which is kind of. But the discussion was around the non-footballing assets and whether they could be used or recognized as revenue for profitability and sustainability rules purposes. And it's kind of, it wasn't a unanimous no, but given the Premier League's history of being quite solid recently, where you might get one or two clubs dissenting, but as a whole, they kind of all stick together and like vote for things. And you have to get something over the line, you need a 2/3 majority, which is pretty similar to a lot of governance structures in terms. It means that then, there's a good solid majority of people who want this to happen. That with the vote was 11-9 against, so they did vote to that the non-footballing assets, if you want to call them, or can be recognised. So they're not falling foul like what Chelsea did in selling the hotels, and it's come across as like, I think what has for me has happened is like, a lot of people in that group, I think, are imagining seeing, oh, this provides us with extra flexibility. So why would I then shoot that, like, vote? Like, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas, and they're like, oh, I've got a couple of hotels, I've got a car park, I've got this. I'm like, everyone's just looking in their sofa like, oh, I didn't realize I had that. Like, do you know what I mean? It doesn't. To me, like, that wouldn't make any asset that I had, even if it was like, we've got 1 million scarves in a warehouse somewhere. I don't know if it quite, but all those sorts of things, I'd just be like, nah, I'm not. I want to make sure I'm as flexible as possible, because I don't know how narrow these rules are going to be and how stringent they're being applied. And people have seen people getting docked points. They don't want to end up getting relegated, refuse to getting docked points. So the more flexibility they have, the better. So I couldn't see, particularly like, if we were just thinking pure like real estate, if you're like a team in a big city, don't even think about London and like where real estate is at a premium and prices for square footage or something can be just ridiculous. Like, Manchester's still expensive, Birmingham is still expensive. Like, all of these teams who are in and around those areas who have big pieces of like freehold land that they could potentially use and sell. Come on, man. Like, and like us, that like land is one of the biggest assets for organizations as well as people. So I just didn't think that it was a smart thing to even like table once you've already kind of said set the precedent before it's happened and set the precedent. I think I don't think people are annoyed that they sold the hotels. I don't think they're annoyed that it's being recognized. I think they're annoyed that they sold it to themselves. I think that's where
that's just business though,
and
that's different. Like, that happens in banking.
And I think that's where people get upset.
I think
it happens, but I think that's like, where a lot of people get like, that's what I'm saying. It happens, and I think that because people are like, oh, how are you going to set the price, and what's market value, and all this kind of stuff. That's why I think that the pain points are for a couple of people when it comes to this issue, that they sold to. If they sold it to Hilton's group, I don't think anybody would have a problem. I think it's the fact that they feel like they're having their cake and eating it. That's the analogy I'd use.
And this
But
is
people do it all the time. I get it.
And this is the thing, though, and also, like, if you look at it just from like a business perspective, right? And this is where sometimes I wonder, like, you've worked with legal teams within sport, like, so okay, Chelsea have exploited it. They found it's not even a loophole. It's because it's not like it's circumvented. They found an opportunity and they've exploited it, right? If you really wanted to make the change for the right reasons, you would have a sit down and you'd look at it and say, how are they able to exploit it? Okay, the language in our pretext or our legal statutes or our rules and regulations weren't tight enough. So we need to actually make it more specific or add an addendum or a revision to make sure that it's tight and it's now clear what we're meaning when we're speaking to certain terminology. You'd almost draw a line under it. It'd be unfair to, I know people are like, oh, but that's crap. Oh, Chelsea have got to, like, okay, you have to sometimes accept that has happened. You now can't attack that one. What you can do is learn from it. You would sit down and go, actually, whatever, Chelsea have, okay, crack on. We need to now revise this and fix this going forward. And you would sit down and actually take some time to think about what you needed to do, what you needed to change, how you needed to start looking at things. And when we come into like other topics, and we've had this before when we talk about the Premier League, not only PSR and other stuff, is they always seem to be on the back foot. And the thing that's crazy on it, right, is how can you be on the back foot when you create the rules? Like, how are the clubs on the front foot? Like, you create the rules, you have the rule book, you have people who this is a part of their day job. Like, you're getting caught on the hop by Premier League executives and smart people within top clubs when you have departments who are responsible for kind of managing, overseeing, and governing this. And I think this kind of just further crystallizes in my mind that, like, first of all, if you think about policy creation or rule creation, they're created in a silo. They're created to address a problem of the time rather than think more strategically about what is it you're trying to preserve, observe, or stop. And as a result, they create something that works all right. And then somebody finds a very cute nuance and an opportunity, and that invariably becomes a source of contention. And then invariably it then just looks like some form of a witch hunt against Chelsea, which when you start to take these to various other governance bodies means you're unlikely to get the outcome you want. And also, one thing that you said that I thought was quite interesting is you said the Premier League has a governance structure or governance framework of a 2/3. So basically 14 out of the 20 teams need to vote for something for it to go forward, to be stopped, right? I find it quite interesting because when that 2/3 rule was created, we had really the traditional big four. And when you think about it, that big four was, okay, you were like, you've got the big four. We need a way to stop them becoming an oligopoly. If we have 2/3, you need the big four plus two. And sometimes they'll find it, sometimes they won't. But now we have a big seven. Like, let's not look at Champions League spaces, but we've actually got big seven because you've got your traditional big four, then your two state-owned clubs, and then Tottenham. So, like, now you've actually got seven. So the big seven can actually, if they all group together, they can block everything, and they can pass what they want and block what they want. So their threshold for passing things, I almost think that needs to be revisited, because now you're now actually at the mercy of what the big seven want. If they say no to everything, nothing will ever go through. No rule will ever be amended. And they can also whip the votes in their favor. Once you've got seven, it's not really hard to get the other seven, really. The teams that have just come up are just kind of happy to be in the party. And they're like, oh, what's going on here? Nice to see you.
I guess funny you should say that, because as well as them failing at this, they didn't bring other things into kind of the motion that they were going to bring in. So obviously they talked about the non-tangible assets, but they didn't even bring in the pieces around what we call like associated partners transactions. So essentially, somebody on your board or somebody who's associated to the organization, who's also then associated to another organization that buys one of your services or products, or which then creates revenue for you. Like that has been something that had also been tabled as something they wanted to look into, and I think they must, the back channeling where everyone's meeting outside the boardroom before they go in. They're like, oh yeah, so the agenda, no,
they floated it at the coffee stand, and they were like,
let's leave that one. Like, we'll leave that one with the tea and coffee. Like, come on, it's just not. They're not even gonna table it. Which again is like, I don't know if it's the fact that they know that maybe a lot of the clubs are definitely not going to do that, and you've got likes of Leicester, or you've got other clubs who are just like, yeah, this doesn't suit me. This is not in my best interest. And if you already got like a voting block already, how difficult it is to kind of pass going through. So, just interested to hear what you think in terms of why maybe they didn't want to bring that forward, or was it that they didn't think the timing was right, or was it they
numbers, man? They did have the numbers. They probably thought they had whispers that they thought they could get there, realized they didn't have the numbers, and they literally removed it from the agenda. Too sweet. Somebody was reprinting the agenda items to that AGM meeting quick and reprinting all the stuff in the boardroom before the executive sat down. They didn't have the numbers. And I think this is where sometimes it's really interesting, right? If you just strip football away and just look at it from a good business practice, right? Same with you in your day job, right? When you're tabling something to the board, at the point you're coming for ratification, sign off, and it's not an FYI information piece, they've usually you've got a bit of a feel, right? A bit of a flavor. You're like, okay, this will land pretty well with the majority. There's 3 or 4 that may have additional questions and reservations, and these are the things I've kind of captured to be able to get them comfortable and at ease. I ultimately think that when they're considering this, they almost don't go through that process with the same amount of rigor, because to be missing things off or taking and not tabling motions, but people knowing what those motions are, that means that you don't have the numbers, and you're then going to go back to the drawing board of refining it to bring it back. Mm-hmm. And the disadvantage in that type of governance structure comparative to the one you and I experience in our day jobs is they've now got a head start knowing at the next AGM, this will be on the agenda. So then the added benefit of being able to decline it then formally, and then force you to go back to the drawing board for the 3rd time. So by the time you actually table something, it's a sanitized version of what you wanted in the end. You come out of it thinking you've won. They come out of it knowing they have won. And 2 people leave happy, but only 1 is actually leaving happy. The other is naive.
Yeah. I guess with again, I find it similar with the things that they didn't get to vote on, and I think there were some bits in there around self-disclosure as well, which looked at.
I saw that.
Well, I don't even understand. Like, you want me to snitch on myself? Like you have to self-report any financial rule breaches, and consult about legal action. Like, do you know how? I'm not like a legal expert again, but I have a certain amount of, I think, commercial awareness to know that what you see in front of you isn't always what is happening. People can be coming to you nicely saying, oh yeah, we want to do this business, we want to do this business with you. Next thing you see a lawsuit on your desk the next day saying you copied my idea, you did this, you did that, you did this. So like, why would I consult with you? Like, that whole thing would just be an absolute farce. And then why would I tell you if I've broken a rule? Like, again, it doesn't, unless there's going to be some sort of
leniency,
for good behavior, for a third of your time, like then you might even do it. But still, that we see that doesn't work, because you know what? People don't think they're gonna get caught, or people don't think they did anything wrong. So this rule just didn't make any sense to me as a lay person. I was like, I couldn't imagine saying, and how would you even know? Some of the bits is like, you also need even if you are helpful and you want to be cooperative, sometimes you don't even know that you've done something wrong. because it wasn't intentional, but it still was wrong. And therefore, are you still going to be harshly dealt with on that basis? I just thought the whole thing just didn't make no sense to me at all. But yeah,
I just thought like at some point, like whoever was putting the agenda together and the kind of items had lost their head, because I thought on the self-reporting, on a serious note, the premise of it isn't a wrong one. Like you see it in loads of industries. In the banking, there is a kind of obligation to self-disclose or report any breaches or any things that have like crystallized. But I think the difference is, right, in those examples, the people they have to report it to are true regulators of the industry. The Premier League is a governing body. It's a governing body.
It's a membership club. It's a membership club. It's not a governor. It's a membership club.
Yeah. It's not a regulator, and as such, if you do not regulate them really in the truest sense, like Ofcom, Ofgem, and you can like
FCA or whatever, like
and all these type of organizations, the self-reporting and the disclosure is never going to be really effective. And then even if you say you were to try and do that, look at what team was it that were actually honest? Was it Forest? Which one of them? One of them actually.
It was Everton. It was Everton. I think Everton, said they were honest and they were trying to get. It was the second time around with Everton, remember? And they were saying that, we came out as soon as we were aware, blah, 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 blah. But they'd already set the precedent of what a financial breach would be. And it was their second time. So,
so people are looking at Everton. And if I'm like a senior exec, right, I'm like, hold on a sec. So Everton took a fine. Forest took a fine. There's concerns about Chelsea and City, real concerns about Chelsea City, concerns about Villa and Newcastle, and they haven't copped the fine. Why am I going to cooperate? I'm going to wait for them to try and catch me. Like, why am I going to come willingly? Like, they've been chasing City for 6 years.
And it's at a point in time when you know they are stretched, when you know that they're fighting legal battles. Like, so when they say pick your battles with someone and they've got their eye on somebody else, they're trying to fight 4 different enemies right now. They're trying to fight UEFA, they're trying to fight Super League, they're trying to fight Man City and all that, like the King's Council that they have. So they're all these things that are going on. They're trying to fight the government on the regulator and and then so now you want me to like make your job easier when I could just keep my mouth shut, and then even if it does happen, what's really going to happen? So yeah, that was just
I found that at that point I just thought like that just seems really reckless, and then ultimately giving them sight of some of the motions, like they're just going to prep. They're probably sitting down thinking, okay, if they're going to table that at the next AGM, they're probably speaking all the executives about what is it they want out of it. Because ultimately, like, and this is where it comes to, you can see why they're calling for an independent adjudicator or regulator, because I don't think the Premier League can govern. First of all, I don't think they can govern the big 7, talk less of the 20. They can manage and try and curtail and bring people along the journey, influence in some parts, but they can't. Like, they can't regulate them because they're too big, they're too complex as organizations, they're worth too much money, they're worth too much to the individuals that have the most at stake, like for them to be governed by people. And I think this is why one of the things I thought about, and as we go to kind of the Man City, I almost think like it's like saying, to catch a shark, you've got to hire a shark. And this is why I almost say, if you look at the people that own the Premier League, I almost feel you need to fill it with people who have worked in this sector or this industry, whether it's like investment banking, whether it's commercial, corporate law, who actually understand this stuff and understand the mindset of these individuals. But I know someone will probably come to me in the chat or in the message say, yeah, but they hired the senior partner from Bird and Bird. She's now the head of legal at the Premier League. If they have, fantastic. But what that is showing is that he or she or that individual isn't enough. They need more of those people, because if they had more of those people, you'd be able to see how they think, what they're potentially looking after, what they're going after, and then you'd be able to adjust accordingly. Like, and here's like a little silly anecdote before we go into that Man City. I know like you've got a lot to say on that one. Is like when they closed the loophole on the Chelsea exploiting the amortized contracts, right? I remember at the time I was like, oh, okay, they closed that, and I remember I was just like on the internet, on Twitter, and I'm not going to try and lay credit or take credit for something that wasn't mine, but somebody actually who was just smart individual, followed football, actually said, but you just there's another way around this, and I was like really interested. I was like, how you can't amortize over 8, it has to be over 5. They were like, if those 3 years can't be amortized against, what you've now said to those owners. So, for example, Chelsea signed Esteval, bad example because as part of the contract they've said they won't loan him out. But okay, Chelsea signed some young Brazilian kid, 8-year contract, 60 million. Can't amortize him over 8, so they can't make it 7.5 million a year. It has to be 15 or whatever it is. In the 3 years that you can't amortize him for, you will just recruit the amount that you would probably have had as the amortization in loan fees. So, and this is the thing that's really interesting. I didn't know, like, for some of these loan fees that Chelsea are doing, whether it's Lukaku, they're collecting 6 mil, 5 mil, 7 mil, and they're also not on the hook for the full salary. So Chelsea will just be like, fine, we'll amortize over 5. We're going to loan him out for 3 years, and we're going to loan him out either to ourselves, Strasbourg, like another example, loan him to ourselves, Strasbourg, 3 million a season, 1.5 mil bonus if he plays 20 Ligue 1 games. Oh, wait, Patrick Vieira, can you play him for 20 games, please? Of course, right? You'll layer those bonuses in, so you'll just end up getting that money back another way. And when I read that, I was like, shit, that's so smart. And it's actually legit. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, even if they don't use the Strasbourg route, they actually go and find a loan club.
Yeah, independent club.
So you need people who kind of think that way and see football that way. And this is why, like,
you know, it's like how government infrastructure hire hackers. Like, they hire people who are trying to actively break the system, and they send out, like, you know, hackathons, and they send out invitations to, like, people who we considered criminals to try and do their very best in order to manipulate, break, exploit, take advantage of the system. But it just feels like some of it with the Premier League is like we're too big a brand, or in order that people will inevitably just fall in line, or there isn't that cohesion that there is because it's 20 individual organizations now not working as a collective. And I've said that before, where it's like, maybe it's not the fact that they don't have the expertise, it's that one is pulling the other, and therefore instead of minds coming together to share knowledge and share understanding, it's siloed, and people aren't necessarily taking the advantage of the fact that, you know, there's this big group of people that could be a step ahead of the game. Maybe they did that before, early, when they were setting it up, but now it feels much more splintered.
Yeah. And then you then see it transpire into, like, getting
legal action against the club, against the Premier League. Like one club, Man City, is suing the Premier League, and it's around that associated party transaction rules that we kind of briefed them on before. Which actually I don't think was a part of the vote that they reached to, but had been part of previous discussions that they had. And essentially, it's this rule initially came in because of the Saudi-led takeover of Newcastle, which required the club to prove that the deal that they have for say sponsorship is justifiable based on the going rate, and I guess it's to kind of prevent you saying, you know, sponsoring Newcastle
100 mil
is 500 mil, and it's like, whoa, where did you get that figure from, bro? And then so now City are saying that they're opposing this policy, and it's due to, I guess, the makeup of their board, and the City Football Group, and they argue that these rules are essentially targeted to people like them, which again is, if I'm honest. that bit's not capped. That bit is actually true. So what do you think are the implications if City win this thing? If City do actually win?
It's I think there's two ways to look at it, right? I think people are looking at it in a narrow way. There's like City win, City lose. But I think there's actually 3 options. City win, City lose, and City win a part of it. And this is the thing that's quite interesting, right? I don't think City will win the entire thing, because if they do, that like football's fragmented and broken
Yeah, I
instantly.
feel like it's crumbled. Like I'm almost like, oh,
Uh,
they
there was
gone off to the fact that the 14 the 2/3 majority is undemocratic, and it's
yeah,
like, oh, so that would just go away of like the 20-year governance of the Premier, 30-year governance of the Premier League.
but I think what it will do is it will show that the Premier League have been discriminatory with their rules and their statutes and their laws, but not the fact in them existing, but in the fact that they've been changing it based on specific clubs. What that means is if you change it for, and this is what happens when I say like you're not looking at the bigger picture of what the rule is there to do. You're looking at it as in like, how do I close it on this club and another club trying to do the same thing? But another club is not going to try and do the same thing. They're going to do a flavor. That is it. And this is why they'll get done on it being discriminatory. But the essence of what they're trying to do, if they were actually thinking about it strategically, rather than, oh no, Newcastle being sold, we need to block this. Oh no, Chelsea try and sell hotels, we need to block this. And actually said, why is it clubs are able to exploit this current rule? Why is it written in this certain way? They would actually be able to respond more effectively. But the fact they changed the rule 4 days after Newcastle deal went through, and then they tabled the Chelsea motion 3 months after Chelsea had actually disclosed they were going to do it to them, and then 4 weeks after it got leaked into the papers on a Friday night, it just looks like you're responding to those clubs. So to answer your question, if they win, football's done as we know it. Like, and you're going to see more clubs. And they're not done. That's hyperbolic, but I mean, is in the current makeup of how.
I mean, the PSR rules are done. That's what I would say. That's done.
That's done. Like, just stop that. Like, altogether, and just like we'll probably move to your NBA luxury tax, where you're like, you know what, the horse is bolted, can't get the horse back, but what we can do is manage how quickly the horse goes around the circuit, and we'll put in different brakes to slow the horse down. That's what they can do. I think where we might land is the middle, where City will win on the discriminatory grounds. The rule will still stand, but there'll probably be some questions about the way the Premier League is changing the rules, essentially kind of targeting clubs, really, like rather than actually targeting the essence of the issue at hand. That is going to be talked about a bit more, and how they respond to that, I don't know.
I think again, there's going to be clubs who are going to be looking at this eagerly, thinking, I would quite like to be able to inflate some of these deals, because we've got owners with some deep pockets, like, you know, and we've got board members, and we've got associates, and all this sort of stuff. As you said, it does seem reactive to, you know, the various events and clubs that happen. But again, my thing about this, you know, is it feels like, you know, like you're trying to regulate free market and capitalism in a certain way, like because you don't like the outcome of what capitalism has produced. Like,
that's a perfect
like they were happy when the free market was, when we've seen the last 25 years of the Premier League, but now they kind of like it feels so odd to me that everyone kind of, again, I'm an immigrant, so maybe I'm biased, but like foreign investors and foreign management and like to think that that all the people here who were running and owning business clubs were doing it so above board, were doing it so well. Like the clubs are always like financially in great places. There was no links to corruption or human rights abuses. Like that. That's just. I genuinely think that's just a misconstruing the truth. Like if you want to look into the history of some of the previous owners and the dodginess that they got involved in, and how they made their money, you will find very similar things. Even if you want to say Chelsea, I think Chelsea was bought for £1 at one point by Ken Bates. Or who did he buy the club for £1?
But he bought it for £1.
Like, is that a gross underestimation of the value of Chelsea at that time? Like, but
mismanagement that led to him buying it for £1.
but would then people be like, oh, you know, I don't like the fact that he bought it for £1. He should have had to pay 50 million, because that's the true value of what it was worth if you look to what he sold it onto. So I think it's kind of like they want capitalism, they want free market until it doesn't benefit or favor the people that you think it should. And in this current climate, in the globalized climate where we're seeing everybody connected and some people's pockets are really deep because of this particular resource or that particular PE or fund or whatever, that you're now like, it feels like you're getting upset with it. My thing is, like, if you shut it down, and I think we've seen this with the current PSR, is that these guys are so smart that they will find new ways. It will just be in a different guise. It's like if you shut private schools down tomorrow because you wanted to end elitism, there'll be no more private schools. You think, so, okay, we fixed the problem. Then what will happen? The people will just get home tutored. They'll be the person that will be able to afford tutoring at maths group. They'll be the person that can afford. So to me, I'm just thinking like this is just free market working. But what you're trying to do is put in rules to prevent it from working. When I think like you're saying, right, I don't think that City will win on the basis of it's undemocratic, because I feel like that's kind of like bog standard. People are doing it in lots of different field sectors. You know, what I feel they may get some value in, and I guess it would be interesting to see then who pays the compensation for if they were to win, because they're claiming for lost revenue as a result. So they're claiming like, yeah, we should have got 100 million or 500 million from Etihad as a sponsor of our group. Like, who then pays? Is that the Premier League that then pays for it? And does that Premier League is just made up of members, and that pot of money, does that come from does it come from each individual member? I imagine they have insurance to protect them on certain things like that. But it feels like you're almost hurting the brand of yourself. But I feel like this also shows that clubs now think they are bigger than the Premier League, which is why you're going to see stuff like the Super League and all these other stuff. Like the clubs, when the Premier League was first started, it was a group. Now there's some teams, I'm sorry, they're bigger than the league. They just and it's maybe manifested in the ways that we're talking about, in that they have the sharpest, deepest pockets. They have the sharpest people working for them. They have the best strategists. Like, they're involved in so many different pies that it's kind of making the Premier League feel a little bit, dare I say, like antiquated in some ways, in the way it's kind of governing and being run, and how they're operating now, in terms of like, we're almost like they're operating like a Walgreens or like, I'm talking about like a big conglomerate. Like we're operating like Pfizer, and you're trying to operate like Wilson's Pharmacy down the road, and it's just you're Lloyd's. Like, it's just not working out.
The thing that grabs me there that I find quite interesting is like, so if you think about what's the genesis of all this stuff, right? Like, and if we go back, it was allowing the Saudis to buy Newcastle. It was allowing the Abu Dhabi group to buy Manchester City. Because when they did that, did you really think they were going to play by your rules? Like, it's that kind of like think about in sports, right? When you have Mavericks, right? So let's say Balotelli. I almost don't feel sorry for any of the clubs he was at post Inter Milan. You knew what you were getting. Like, when you brought him over, you knew you would get that you would get the sublime to the absolutely crazy. So any manager that was pissed, I was like, no, but you had previous of this. Like, you knew what he was about. And it was the same thing when you look at the sale of Newcastle. You had previous experiences of state-owned clubs where, for example, you had it with Man City. You'd seen the PSG experience, because the PSG experience was more advanced, and how the French government and the French Football League and Liga weren't a fan of it. You'd seen it happen, but rather than actually strengthen your owners, like your fit and proper test, and actually make it virtually impossible, you've now managed to find a way to let it happen, believe you can control the narrative and the pace of what they want to do. And this is probably where the Premier League don't understand the complexity of these state-owned clubs and how deep they go. So the owner of Man City, I think he's he's president of the UAE. His brother's the king. The king is obviously Etihad is a state-owned airline, flagship airline of the UAE, which obviously then means it's owned by the king, and which obviously means an element's owned by the brother. So like you're now not dealing with like oil tycoons anymore. You're not dealing with the Romans or the steel magnates, Tashki Metal or uranium guy in Usmanov and stuff. You're dealing with people where they are like this is like state money. This isn't like I made 20 billion in oil. I am Sir Jim Ratcliffe. I create a chemical company. This is I'm sitting on a 1 trillion sovereign wealth fund like type business. And I almost feel like there's a level of naivety when you knew who the individuals were that were interested in purchasing these clubs, that you didn't necessarily think about some of this stuff in a what is actually a smart way. And I think the thing that's also quite poignant, and I'd be keen to get your thoughts because you raised it on the European Super League. I personally, and people may think I'm being cynical or not, or I'm being like, oh, defeatist or like contrarian, is I think even if City lose this case and they lose the 115, like Barcelona and Real Madrid, that European Super League, they're not still happy about the way the pie is being cut. I actually feel like you may actually, A22 is still out there, the company that obviously tabled the Super League. I think you may just push them further into their hands because to trigger the Super League, I don't think you need the 12 teams. I think you need 5. I think you need 5 of those stalwarts of English football that you meant of European football that you mentioned that operate at a different level. And I know Man City aren't one historically, but they are one now. So do you get a Real Madrid, Barca, and you get City? That's the dominoes will start to fall. And then suddenly, before you know it, you have 8, then you have 12.
Yeah, and think of how little the value becomes of the Premier League once 1 or 2 of those clubs stop competing in it. Let's be honest, it would tank. Like if it had a stock, you just see it just going. And I do think that it feels the first time, I don't know, like a club has sued the Premier League. I can't think of any in my lifetime. So I said it feels like this relationship is starting to fracture. Like even if it's, can you see it settling? Could you? Because that's one of the arguments is that, okay, obviously they have their 115 charges going on. Is this just a play in order to leverage against getting those charges dropped or a settlement reached on those particular issues? But to me, I see it maybe as just that, yes, it could be, but I just see it as a deeper root issue where, like, I'm bigger than you, I'm better than you. I'm starting not to like you, if I'm honest, and we're starting to not be aligned on many things, and I can feel myself going this way, and it feels like you're trying to control me to come this way. And so, if Man City are going to be the first to release the trigger on it, I think they probably are maybe in the best position financially because they can take the hit, like you said, like even if it's rocky for a season or 2 while they're the early adopters, they can absorb it more so than others. And also, like, it may be that the Man City fans, they've been through tough times. They've been through like League One and all that kind of stuff, and then come up and feel like in many ways that they deserve a lot of their success from the tough times that they had to see Man United lift up the trophy and the trebles and all this kind of stuff. So now if they then are the ones who actually change the landscape even further, like that to me is almost another legacy created that they can actually.
They pioneered the European.
So I can see them being the one where, and it also is like getting to the stage where they won 3 on the trot. Is it completed it? like honestly, is it like
now? It's 4 on the trot. It's 4.
It's 4 on the trot.
So like they'll be like, it's like, wait, we completed it, we kept the trophy, like now we decided to set up our own competition. It's like if you win the World Cup 3 times, you get to keep it, I think.
Yeah, so that's what I'm like. I think that's another sign of thinking, and these guys are constantly thinking about what's new, what's next, where is this going, when you look at Real Madrid, Barcelona, and the current revenue streams, when you look at like what's happening globally with sport, when you look at Netflix and streaming services and all these things, like they want like almost like a guaranteed product to pay for. Like, do you know what I mean? They're going to be spending a lot of money, but they want a guaranteed product. They want hits. They want Orange is the New Black. They want House of Cards. They want, do you know what I mean? They want stuff that's going to make money, and they don't want to make. They're not coming into it to, small change because of the amount of cost and the startup cost it is to get into these sort of things. And something like the Super League will just create, like, I think a different level. Like, you can argue much about relegation and promotion, but look at the NFL, look at the NBA. Like, they are ridiculous brands that are huge in value.
And the thing that always blows my mind, and this is where I'm saying, like, you could have a rule, or you could have created a rule, but amend it based on the times changing. One of like the biggest kind of reasons for the advocacy of the PSR is it has ensured that less clubs go insolvent and instilled competitiveness in the league. So let's do the competitive in the league, right? So City have won 4 league titles in a row, right? They've won 6 of the last 8, right? So outside of City, Chelsea, Liverpool, and United, how many other teams have won the league in the last 20 years? Less. So we talked about this competitiveness, right? For me, competitiveness isn't, and this is where sometimes when people go, yeah, the Premier League's more competitive than the Farmers League, PSG, or the Bundesliga, or whatever, or Ligue 1. I'm like, but look at it, right? So in Spain, like realistically, 2 teams win La Liga, maybe sometimes 3. Atletico, like, give Simeone his flowers. He's won twice, or however many times he's won Atletico, right? So I get that, but just because we get 4 winners instead of 2, that's not competitiveness to me. The NBA is competitive.
Yeah.
The NBA is competitive, like, because if you look at the last 20 Super Bowls or last 20 NBA finals, there's probably like 8 winners.
Yeah.
10 winners in that. But we believe competitiveness is 4 teams in 20 years. And therein lies the problem. So that's where, for me, PSR is not working, because it doesn't meet that obligation. And if you talk about insolvency of football clubs, an insolvency of football clubs came from bad ownership, which came from bad vetting and due diligence of the owners on the way in, as well as the actions they took whilst they were in post, right? You didn't need the PSR to do that for them. You just need to hire people that had a better understanding of business sense outside of football, which is why it always interests me when people go, oh, like Sheikh Muldoon, what does he know about football? Todd Bowley, what do they know about football? Stan Kroenke, I'm like, oh, they don't know anything, but they own billion-dollar businesses, so they're clearly not morons. Like, you don't stumble your way to 15, 20 billion. Like, maybe if you win like what's that lottery in America? Is it like the Thunderball?
The Mad Lotto that they have. Euro millions. Our equivalent of the Euro millions. But maybe that's still only like a couple billion. It's not tens of billions.
Couple bill.
I'll be happy with it. I'm saying that,
but that's the thing that I'm like, I don't think that PSR, what it was meant to do then is credible. What is meant to do now isn't doing the job, and that's because they're trying to force a square peg in a round hole, whilst they should actually be redesigning something to fit the current environment. And invariably, in them refusing to accept that change, they're having change forced upon them by the people that they're meant to be kind of overseeing, not regulating. So I'm just watching this space, because I actually think whether City win or lose, the Premier League as we know it is
kind of moving in a different direction. I think we've got to wait until 2025 for the actual verdict. But I think that, yeah, there may be some shifts in before then. Maybe there's a settlement.
I have a question for you though. If they lose, if they lose 115 charges, what do you think the punishment will be?
Oh, but that's separate to that's the charges for the PSR. This is do you think if they lose that, then
if they lose this one, if they lose the associated partnership ruling, there is no kind of like life.
Yeah, it's kind of like status quo, isn't it? Yeah.
You just pay your legal fees and you move on. But like
maybe if they lose all of the charges, I think it's almost like a lose-lose for the Premier League at this moment in time.
Can't give that cop out.
No, I'm saying it's a lose-lose for the Premier League. Do you know why? Because if they lose, so if the Premier League win and Man City are like they find that all these charges are correct, it undermines the whole credibility of the last when they were charged with these particular issues. And what are they going to do? Are they going to do like Olympics where they dock people, where you finish running up, but the guy who won was doing some mad level testosterone injections before, and now you're the gold medalist, but nobody knows who you are because you're from like 1980, and we only found out this 5 years later. So it just undermines the credibility. If they lose the 115 charges, they lose again because everyone's like, Man City got away scot-free. Like they run amok. The rules don't apply to the big. So it undermines credibility, and that's why I'm saying for the Premier League, it's a lose-lose right now. The situation that they've got themselves in, and maybe smartly, the way that Man City have just dragged it out. And I think one of the quotes from the guy you just mentioned about him, he would rather pay like tens of millions in fees than settle. Like, these guys don't care. Like they are bitter and they are bad man and they have the money to do it. Like they don't care. So that's why I think for them, like they're just playing this long game, knowing that, all right, is it likely that they're going to be stripped of any points or things like that in those coming years? Will they have to pay a big fine? They can pay it, great. But even if that does happen, that still isn't a win for the Premier League, because everybody now just looks at this as like, do people get their bets back? You know, like, you know, that bet you cashed in when Man City we're going to win the double or the treble, and now they like, what happens? That's where I just think it's lose-lose for the Premier League. Whereas like it can end up badly for the Man City as well. But at the end of the day, they'll probably pay it off if it's money, and if it's stripping of like points and titles, they're almost like, I don't know how that works. Fees. I don't think that's even a feasible option. I think
the titles, right? The thing is, like, so I remember when I think she was a heptathlete, like, who came after Dame Kelly Holmes, Kelly Southerton, where like at European Championships they found I think one of the Russians doped. A silver medal. She said something I think that was spot on, where she said, even if you get the medal retrospectively, all that sponsorship you didn't get because you weren't the European gold medalist or you the European silver medalist. So like people will say when Chelsea beat City in the final, the Champions League, City shouldn't have been there, that they robbed them of a Champions League final spot, that it should have actually been whoever Man City beat in the semis.
It wasn't PSG. It might have been PSG. I can't remember.
So everyone that played them along the way, or if you got relegated by City, because you'll be like, oh, we got relegated to the Championship off that Aguero goal, like, but it was beaten then, so we would have won that game. So I almost feel like it serves no purpose to strip and award. I know Arsenal fans, they haven't won a league in 20 years, so anything they can to get a title, like, because it was Arsenal snitched in the first place, so on them charging them this week. So I get why they're doing it, but. And also, even if you do a points deduction, we were chatting about it, like pre-wedding chat. One of the guys is an Arsenal fan, was super gassed. It's like, oh yeah, deduct 25 points. You know, if you deducted 25 points this year, they still finish in like a Champions League spot.
Yeah, I know.
So what you're basically saying is, for their 6 years of deceit and corporate and financial mismanagement, they lose the right to win the league, but they get
keep that.
Like, if I'm Sheikh Muldoon, I'll be like, guys, we're going to start with minus 25. I need you to smoke all the 34 teams and get as high as we can. And obviously, we know that we'll probably have hard games against Arsenal and Liverpool. If we get 30 wins, that's 90 points. Deduct our 25, that gives us 75. That puts us in third. Champions League, boys, we'll go again.
I don't know the timeline on that, to be fair, if that's going to come out, if that's scheduled to come out before the litigation that they brought against the Premier League.
I think that one's so that the Premier League against the litigation, I think the case starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's 2 weeks. It's a quick turnaround with this one, so it should be done by July.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure I read somewhere saying that, like, yeah, this one should, because the reason it's because it's not being voted on, and I guess it's being done by an external process, so it's a bit more swifter, like a lawsuit. So it will be addressed way before the 115 charges in February. But
yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. It's been another crazy few weeks in football and finance. Like I say it all the time, like it's such a big topic, and there's stories coming out all the time. It's been good to get back, kind of looking at them and researching them and seeing what the implications are, what our views and perspectives on it, and sharing them with yourselves. Obviously, this is episode 10, so we made it to a season. No, we made it to 10, which is I don't know. Yeah, it's an achievement though, anyway, isn't it? Like we did 10. But like, share, subscribe, give us some feedback, post it to different channels. We're gonna try and come up with different formats of the same content, so like shorter videos and stuff like that. But yeah, good to see you, and hopefully see you again next time.
See you again next time. I'll see you next week, but hopefully in colder temperatures.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye, Rob.
Bye.